Good morning, everyone. Kris here with Inspired Energy. Joining me this morning, Hartwell. Good morning, Hartwell.
Good morning, Kris. Good morning, everyone.
Hope everyone is trying to stay cool out there with this heat wave that we're having. Uh, this morning, Hartwell's decided we're going to go a little philosophical. So, the topic for today is overcoming the barriers to growth and releasing resistance to life. So, at Clarity, we talk a lot about spiritual growth, awakening, authentic living. And as an astrologer, a human design analyst, Christian, and metaphysician, how do you see these things as being related?
Well, to me, these things are whatever language you use, whether it's I want to grow spiritually, or I want to evolve, or I want to wake up, or I want to be my authentic self. If you apply yourself to those intentions, I think it takes you in the same direction. Um, I wouldn't say they're exactly synonymous. There might be differences that you could talk about, but any of those intentions take you in the same direction. From fear to love, for instance, is one of the way, is one of the, is one of the aspects of that.
Okay. So you mentioned fear to love. So what role do fear and love play in this journey? And how do we shift our center of gravity from fear to love?
Well, this is where spiritual teachings can help, like some of the organized religions can sometimes help with that. But the first thing to do is to recognize it. Um, it's so obvious to look out at the world and see how fear operates and what happens when people get into strong fear places. And in myself, it's easy to see what that does too. It causes us to want to control things, to shrink, to hold, and to barricade ourselves away in various places.
Mhm.
Whereas love has an opposite effect. It feels expansive, it feels relaxing, it feels like it opens us up to possibilities rather than shuts us down. Um, but the challenge is if we're in a deeply fearful place, we can't just say, "Oh, I want to be loving." It takes a little bit more work than that.
Mhm.
You
It's
know what
not
I
all
mean?
love and light.
Yes. Well, um, if you try and convince yourself to be loving,
Mhm.
without doing shadow work, for instance, then you're going to end up coming across as superficial and ungrounded.
So you
And that's
mentioned
what,
shadow work. How does all of that fit in?
well, some of us are aware of this idea of shadow because we've done a lot of personal work. We recognize what our weaknesses are, what our fears are, what our terrors are. Um, if we are not doing much, if we haven't awakened very much, then we might look out at the world and say, we might be able to identify all our fears, but they all seem external to us. Okay. They all seem like they're out there somewhere. And so when we do shadow work, we have to recognize, okay, there's a relationship between the things that I fear in the world and fear in life and my own interior work. That's how shadow work begins. We begin by saying, oh, why is it that I always attract abusive, um, why do I always attract liars into my life? People who play head games.
Hmm.
And then we start to look at that and we start to recognize in ourselves where we play head games. We
Hmm.
start to recognize where in our lives we are complicit with that. And so these shadows become over time our weaknesses, our challenges. It becomes more obvious to us. Is that making sense?
Yeah, and it seems like when you do the shadow work, then everybody is mirroring back to you, so then you can take a look at it, is kind of what it sounds like.
Yes. That might be the first way you begin to be aware of your own shadows, is by recognizing what nasty element do you always seem to meet with in the world?
Mm-hmm.
What always seems to show up in your life that you dislike?
Mm-hmm.
That starts to make you wonder, why is that happening? And as you look into that, this is where you start to awaken. This is where you start to look beneath the surface of life.
Right.
So getting past denial is one of the very first steps that we take. But that first step, when we start to recognize the nastiness in the world, we might fight against it. We might go to war against it.
Mm-hmm.
This is not okay in the world. I need to go to war against this energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is still on some level a denial of your own shadow. Although it is more active, you're coming into a more conscious relationship with it at that point.
Right. So you talk a lot about the Toltec path. What does it talk about?
Well, one of the many things that I've that impacted me when I was studying it in depth is that our shortcomings are our ticket to power. Most of us talk on some level about wanting to be powerful in our lives. We look at people who are powerful in the economic world, or we look at people who are powerfully persuasive or charismatic, or powerful in the spiritual world as models and guides. And we know we want to feel powerful in our life. And so the Toltec path says, to be powerful in life is something that is a birthright for all of us. But that birthright has to be earned by turning our shortcomings into gifts. So, in metaphysical language, we might say turning the lead into gold. The lead is the shadow, and the gold are our higher powers, our greater gifts.
This is the alchemy.
Yes. Or as one of our other spiritual teachers says, reconciliation. We need to be reconciled with our shortcomings and start seeing themselves as something to push away or deny, but instead say, I need to embrace this. Why? Because only if I look at my shortcomings and my shadows, same thing, different words for the same thing. It's from those things that it's in those things that my treasure is buried, my gifts, my power. So our shortcomings, most of us spend a great deal of our life avoiding dealing with our weaknesses. And then once we start looking at our weaknesses, we'll often become obsessed with them. It's like, why am I such a procrastinator? And then we focus on being a procrastinator. Or why am I so distrustful? And then we focus on. So the point is not to get obsessed with and then say, "Oh, woe is me. I'm distrustful and closed off, and I will never be anything else." The point is to dig deep into that, understand its origins, and accept that and say, okay, I'm distrustful. What can I do with that? How do I reconcile? How do I build that into my sense of self so that I can gradually transform it? I have a good example for you.
I was just going to say, can you give us an example?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's talk about anger for a minute. Say you grow up in a family that was very angry. Maybe your father or mother were very angry. Maybe your siblings were angry, but the family dynamic had a lot of anger in it.
Mhm.
And because of the way that you responded to that, the siren's going in the background for me right now. Interesting. Um, Maybe you kind of decided, I have seen how anger hurts people. I have seen how destructive anger is. I will under no circumstances allow myself to be an angry person. And so you bury it in a metaphysical cave on the island of your life. You bury that anger because there's no way that you're ever going to relate to that because you see it and know it as being very destructive.
Mhm.
But the thing is, at some point, life is going to push you into the corner. And and then you are in a moment of extremity. You're going to reach back into the cave where the sword is buried on your island, and you're going to pull out that sword, and you're going to, hash and slash and hack at the people or circumstance around you that catalyze that.
Mhm.
So the more intelligent way to understand that is to say, I grew up with anger in my life, and there is also anger in me. But an anger, symbolized by a sword, can be a tool. Okay? So why don't I apprentice myself to a good swords master? Why don't I learn how to wield that sword? Why don't I learn to have finesse with it? If I become a fat master swordsman, I'm using my anger, but I'm a, I have such mastery that I will never unintentionally hurt someone.
Mhm.
And so this is a metaphor we can use to apply to any shadow that we have. As long as it remains repressed and denied, it will have an underground but very negative effect on our lives, and we will stay disempowered.
Mhm.
But if you have a destiny to work with anger, you have to have a relationship to it, or else you'll never have the power that comes with somebody who has mastery over that.
Yeah, I think too, what comes to mind for me, and especially from my experience and a lot of other people that I've seen, is these experiences when we don't process or transmute or deal with those emotions and we bury them in that cave, they then turn to disease, physical disease, mental disease, whatever that is. It just doesn't go away. It manifests and it just gets worse and worse until you have to face it and deal with it one way or the other, right?
That's a really great point
Mhm.
because sometimes it'll manifest as outside circumstances, sometimes it'll manifest as something in your body
Mhm.
or a combination of both.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so it really, all of this work, really was brought into a new level of expression or awareness by
Mhm.
Carl Jung, who began to be aware of the way that shadow operates in our life and said, unless you acknowledge, unless you integrate your shadow, you will never be whole.
Mhm. Well, we
And
need both. Yeah.
we need to be whole, and that to be whole and to be empowered is our birthright,
Mhm.
is how God designed us to be.
Right. So
And
tell
that
me, go ahead.
and the, that design is very apparent to me as a long time astrologer and a human design analyst, that life is so interconnected, and that is so obvious that there has to be a designer, which is one of the
Mhm.
old philosophy arguments for the belief in God.
Mhm.
If you live in a universe that's so designed, there has to be a designer.
Right. So let's tie this back to human design. So, can you give
Mhm.
us some examples from human design of the gene keys that might help illustrate the points that you're making here?
Yes. So we are designed by God, in my opinion. I'm going to use that language, and we're perfect the way we are. Um, But we also, if we live a life based on fear, that's the same thing as saying that your life is going to be low vibrational. And when we live out of fear, our inherent qualities express differently. But when we start to move into a place of awareness, then we start to live from a more loving place. And the energy that we express, that our innate intelligence expresses through, raises up.
Mm-hmm.
So an example would be, say you take um, the gate 18. Gate 18, in its shadow expression, is the gate of judgment. So it makes for somebody who is very, very judgmental. And I have that gate. Somebody who's critical, who always sees what could be improved and has this irritatingly elitist and judgmental quality. Now, that's how it expresses from a place of fear, low vibration. But if you raise that up to a higher vibration, it expresses as integrity. This ability to be in alignment with who you are. And at the very highest levels of being, it is a relationship to perfection. And so the Gene Keys gives us a way of understanding that any quality that you can name expresses itself on a continuum. And as it gets expressed, as you raise your own vibration and live your life more based on love, then that vibration opens up into a giftedness.
Mm-hmm.
And any quality that you can name, you can look at from this point of view. And even if you look at your nasty areas, try to imagine how that would look if you started to integrate that. And what would it unfold as a gift?
Mm-hmm.
One more example. Can I use 21?
No, yeah, you use 21.
21 is 21 is the gate of biting through. It is the gate that relates to control. So at the lower vibrations, it relates to control over your environments, control over other people. When fear is behind a desire for control, it is very destructive.
Mm-hmm.
However, when fear gives way to greater awareness and love, then it becomes somebody who has a natural sense of authority, who is listened to because other people see them as someone that they can take care of things,
Mm-hmm.
and trusts them and gives them, and they achieve a natural authority in the best possible way. At the highest level, that becomes a form of valor, an energy that is that 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 draws and calls out of us an incredible admiration, for the incredible bravery, the incredible courage, and the incredible, in quality that's expressing there.
Mm-hmm. So, is there any last comment you want to make before we sign off here?
Well, it really underlines for me, authenticity and being yourself is the only way to succeed in life. And why wouldn't you want to succeed as yourself? Well, you might not want to succeed at yourself if you hate yourself. But now we're seeing that there's a way beyond self-hatred, there's a way beyond envy, there's a way beyond fear, because as you open up beyond that, you will come into places where you fall in love with yourself. Because if you're expressing yourself through your giftedness, then you're a magnificent being.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. True. So with that, we're going to sign off here for today, and we'll join you guys next week, next Wednesday, 9 a.m. If you want any help with readings in astrology, human design, just give us a call, book a call with Hartwell, and we can go more in depth to your charts. And we love seeing you here at Clarity. And if not, call us and we can do that online. So with that, we'll say God bless, and we'll see you next week.